Welcome to the She Said Privacy, He Said Security podcast. Like any good marriage, we will debate, evaluate, and sometimes quarrel about how privacy and security impact business in the 21st century.
Hi, Jody Daniels here. I'm the founder and CEO of Red Clover Advisors, a certified women's privacy consultancy. I'm a privacy consultant and certified informational privacy professional, providing practical privacy advice to overwhelmed companies.
Hi, Justin Daniels here. I am a technology attorney who is passionate about helping companies solve complex cyber and privacy challenges during the life cycle of their business. I'm the cyber quarterback, helping clients design and implement cyber plans, as well as help them manage and recover from data breaches.
This episode is brought to you by Red Clover Advisors. We help companies to comply with data privacy laws and establish customer trust so that they can grow and nurture integrity. We work with companies in a variety of fields, including technology, SaaS, e-commerce, media, and professional services. In short, we use data privacy to transform the way companies do business. Together, we're creating a future where there's greater trust between companies and consumers. To learn more, visit redcloveradvisors.com. Now, Justin, I know you're so excited. You're like a little kid.
I know.
Bouncing out of your seat for this topic.
Yes.
So what are we talking about today?
We're talking about unmanned aircraft systems known as
Drones.
Exactly. So today we have Tom Walker, who is the founder and CEO of DroneUp. DroneUp provides drone delivery and flight services to organizations and communities. Tom has also brought a singular purpose to the unmanned transportation market to bring the economic benefits of drones that are essential for communities and our competitive standing in the world to market today. And the other thing I just want to say is the other reason I'm excited to have Tom is you're going to learn how seriously his company takes privacy and security, which in the drone industry, I consider to be really important. So Tom, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Absolutely. So Tom, talk to us a little bit about how you got here to building DroneUp.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. So after I got out of the military, I served in the military both as a nuclear engineer and then transitioned over into special operations after I was commissioned, and spent my career there doing a whole variety of interesting things around the world. And then after getting out of the military, joined my wife's company. I was the president of her company. It was a technology and software development company. And after several years of doing that, I became aware of drones. I actually didn't have a background in drones, but I kind of was amazed one day when I walked into Best Buy and I realized that for under $1,000, I could buy this autonomous device that actually had more technology than the space shuttle originally did, and realized that these things were going to have a fundamental impact on society. I wasn't 100% clear exactly what that was going to be and how that was going to be. But I knew that that they were going to be powerful and impactful. And so we began developing some software that would allow us to identify drone operators, what skill sets they had, what drone platforms they had, and then be able to rapidly deploy them for missions, whether it was volunteer missions in support of public safety, emergency response, or whether it was commercial operations. And before we knew it, we had over 20,000 operators in the system, and the demand for services began to grow, and eventually we kind of grew out of that, sold that technology company, and went all in on DroneUp.
It's such a fascinating story, and I think you're right. We're really just at the beginning of where this is going. So, Justin, start us off.
So where should we begin? I think I would like to begin by asking you, Tom, what type of data can drones collect that might surprise people?
Well, the amount of data and the type of sensors that are out there right now are powerful. Obviously, we have high resolution at this point, and down to being able to determine whether what side of a coin the coin on the ground is from several hundred feet in the air. The visual capabilities are obviously significant. We have thermal capabilities where we can determine where any particular living organism is from several hundred feet in the air. We can tell people's temperature from over 200 feet in the air. But then we also have other sensors that we're testing that some people may not be aware of. For example, we have sensors that can identify the identity of a particular cell phone or the registration and ID numbers of a cell phone from in the air by simply putting a device on there that appears as though it is a cell tower. So cell phones in the area will attempt to check in and provide their registration data. That data in and of itself doesn't necessarily identify the user on the ground, but that data combined with other data sources can. So just simply by having your phone on, a drone sensor in the air could capture that. In addition to that, we've seen some interesting studies. For example, flying over crime scenes using certain multispectral and hyperspectral devices can determine fluids, what type of fluids are at a crime scene from in the air, and create dynamic imagery almost instantaneous of a crime scene and where every drop of blood and every drop of other bodily fluids might be within a crime scene. Obviously, that's not necessarily a privacy concern unless those particular sensors, like I just talked about, are utilized for nefarious purposes outside of what they may have been previously designed for.
I have a follow-up question to what you just shared. If you are in the air and able to see some of those very fine details, can you add a little bit of how some of that information is used? You talked about the crime scene example. What would be some other examples where that information is collected and how it's utilized?
So, for example, one of the things that we can do with the multispectral and hyperspectral sensors is we can do geological surveys that are perfectly acceptable, where we can fly over a particular area and determine mineral deposits and quality of soil, and we can fly over agriculture and we can determine the growth condition, fungus condition, water condition, and health of plants. We are able to just essentially fly right over a parking lot, for example, and we can tell whether the lighting is appropriate based on the current code requirements and whether the spaces, and we can do all of that almost instantaneously. There's other things that we can do as well. For example, we could fly over a parking lot and capture. We can. I'm not saying we do. I want to be very clear on that. I mean, we're talking about what the capabilities that are out there that people may be surprised about, that can instantly collect all of the license plate data in the parking lot and even the VIN numbers through the windows over the dash, and then put the VIN number to the license plate number for rapid identification of vehicle ownership.
So as you just pointed out, those are some of the capabilities of what you can do, not necessarily what you are doing. And laws like to come around to help decide what companies can and can't be doing. Can you share a little bit about some of the privacy regulations that might exist now and how they are positively or negatively impacting the drone industry?
Yeah, this is an interesting intersection that I think is going to become even more significant as the volume of drone flights increase. And so, for example, there's one law in Arkansas right now that's on the books that says you cannot capture any private property video or imagery from a drone. It's very specific to drones. You can do it from satellites, you can do it from planes and helicopters, you can do it from the ground, but you can't do it from drones. That's an interestingly restrictive rule, because while I understand the intent of why it was put in there, which was really more geared to non-professional recreational operators and putting drones over private property and collecting data, it does become very restrictive in terms of certain projects we do. So, for example, one of the projects we do a lot is we'll do fly a piece of property and get an orthomosaic for maybe pre-construction or post-construction analysis, or we're doing a parking lot inspection where we're flying to measure the quality of the pavement to see if it needs any improvements. And then there's homes adjacent to that. And it's almost impossible because of the altitude that you're flying to not incidentally capture those homes. So there's an example of a rule that's in there that ostensibly made sense when they implemented it, but from a commercial viability standpoint is problematic. In areas where that rule doesn't exist, for example, when we fly, once we capture that data prior to providing that back to the customer, even though we captured the incidental capture of that private property was appropriate and in accordance with the execution of the mission we were doing, we eliminate that data, we delete that data, we shred that data so that there's never a possibility that we are accidentally providing that incidental collection data to a third party.
So kind of, Tom, on that topic, and we're going to talk more about how seriously your company takes its data collection practices, or what are some of the unanticipated consequences of drone video associated with the first responders to traffic accidents? Because I know your company also assists in that area as well.
Well, so this is where our industry is again kind of at that point of having to make decisions that are in the best interest of our industry in terms of demonstrating our commitment to privacy and security, sometimes at the risk of not collecting data that has potential positive implications. So, for example, when we are flying, even if it's a parking lot inspection, or whether we're flying in support of first responders where there may be a traffic accident and we're collecting that data, oftentimes there is other data that we incidentally collect, whereas maybe it's a stolen vehicle, or perhaps as one incident that is a very unfortunate incident that happened with us where we had most likely collected some data that could have been useful in a sex trafficking case, because we didn't keep that data, because we refused until we have an adequate position on it where we can justify the retention of that data. We eliminated and deleted that data right away. And even though law enforcement came to us afterwards and determined that what we had recorded would have been very useful in potentially preventing an escalation of a sex trafficking event, we didn't have the data. And at the time, we just didn't keep the data because we just didn't have the confidence in our controls, because the data is coming off sometimes unencrypted, and then it's going into wherever at the time, a Google Drive or another set, and we didn't have the encryption, we didn't have the controls, and so we didn't keep it. And we know of at least one, actually we know of two instances where that data would have had a positive impact on society that didn't occur because of our strict consideration around the retention of that data.
I'm curious, obviously that was a kind of societal event and you're flying all different types of missions. Do any of your customers, are they asking, can you retain that data? Do they want it for future purposes?
No, actually, the larger customers have the same concerns that we have, and they trust us on it. I mean, you have to keep in mind, people try to compare it to satellite data, but if you look at satellite data and you zoom in really close, sometimes it's hard to tell the difference between a horse, a house, and a dog, right? The data that we're collecting can literally identify a person very, very rapidly. And so our bigger customers, specifically our delivery customers, our policy is we don't record anything. We don't even take a picture of the product being delivered. So like when Amazon sets it on your porch, and they'll oftentimes take a picture of it to show you that. We don't even do that. We literally have our systems set so that they will not record and will not collect any visual data. Now, we can view the data while we're flying, which is obviously for safety purposes to ensure that A, there's nothing in front of us, B, we're not flying over people or moving vehicles, and C, we're not delivering a package on grandma's head. But that data is real-time, non-stored, non-cached, and we verify that on a continual basis to ensure that not even our developers or our operators on the ground have the ability to enable that data capture.
And Tom, just for our audience purpose, there's no legal requirement that you have to do that. That's a principle that's part of your organization.
100%. The only area that we operate in the country that has a legal requirement for that currently we're operating on is Arkansas. but we operate with that same ConOps in every area that we operate, unless it is specifically a data collection mission. And if it's not, for example, delivery, we don't collect any of that data.
What would you say in that vein are best practices for data collection practices?
Well, I think the most important thing is, we've had some weird things too. So we've had people call and say, we would like you to go fly over and give me an aerial orthomosaic of this particular piece of property. And initially, when we first started, we'd say, okay, where's the property? What is it? We'll take the mission. And then one day we had a customer and he said, I need you to go fly this piece of property, and get it back to me as soon as you can. And we said, okay, what kind of data do you want? He said, just all the imagery you can collect of it. It's my neighbor, and I really want to know what's going on over there. And we were like, whoa. So one of the things that I tell people, if you're going to go do aerial missions and collect data, you need to do two things to make sure that you're doing appropriately. One, make sure the customer that is out ordering this from you has the authority to review that property, and make sure that you put the liability on them for their responsibility to do that. And if at any point you don't feel like this is an appropriate flight or appropriate in terms of data collection, don't take it. There's plenty of other work out there. It is a powerful tool, right? I mean, it is a powerful tool when you put it in the air and you're operating it. So the number one thing is, if you want to, is A, don't collect anything you shouldn't collect, and B, don't retain anything. Deliver it to the customer. Customer is signed off for acceptance. Then you need to have a approved procedure process that you can put in front of somebody that shows that you have deleted that data and it is completely in a condition that cannot be recovered.
Those data minimization practices, right? Don't retain, only collect what you absolutely need. Those are in line with all the current and future privacy laws that are coming along. That's sort of the modern theme, because so many different tools nowadays are data collection machines, drones, extra special data collection machines. So it's really great to see that you're adopting those principles here. And it seems like the idea of ethics, that intersection of ethics and the data collection, is incredibly important and valuable to the work that you're doing.
Well, I appreciate that, but I think the hardest part here is anytime you have a device that's in the air that has that capability, it is almost impossible to implement policy that constrains what you can and can't do. And as you begin to put in specific legal rules and regulations, then we've seen every time one of these has been implemented in the drone world, it became a commercial roadblock. And in many cases, we're not sure that it actually accomplished anything, because it's nearly impossible to actually prove that somebody collected data from a drone that they shouldn't have collected. First off, you have to have the identity of the drone, and then, which you don't have a way to do right now. There's no way to know if a drone flies over your head. You have no way right now of going, I know exactly who that is and what they're collecting. You don't. That's part of the reasons for the remote ID rule. One of the things that the FAA wants to be able to put in is so that we can identify if somebody calls and says, hey, a drone's flying over my head. There is a way. We have ways to do that, but the general public doesn't. And so I believe at some point this becomes good corporate stewardship and ethical behavior. And it's one of the reasons why, as much as we believe there's a lot of value in the data, I would love nothing more, to tell you the truth, is as we're flying delivery missions and these hub and spoke operations where I'm flying out in all these different directions, I would love to continually collect that data. I think there's enormous value in it. There's enormous value from public safety. There's enormous value to municipalities in having updated recent topography of all of the different surroundings. There's other public safety concerns in that if there's a mass event or some type of active shooter situation, being able to immediately provide data that goes, this is what everything around here looks like in the last 24 hours to public safety, hugely valuable. But right now, until we as an industry come together and agree on a set of standards for how we can store that data, and then what are the appropriate policies for how and who can access that data, I feel like it's just better that we don't collect it.
I find it interesting because, Tom, in a way, what you're proposing is something along the lines of what they do in the credit card industry with PCI. Whereas an industry, they've come up with a set of policies and principles that they all abide by that is, to this point, forestalled regulation in that industry, because everyone knows if you don't comply with PCI, you'll be out of the club, and everybody needs payment processing.
Well, and it's a problem for our industry because we don't have a kind of an industry standards group that gets together and kind of all signs on and says, here's how we're going to do anything. Anything. We don't have that. And more importantly, we're controlled by a government agency, the FAA, who their job is not privacy and security. The FAA's job is the protection of the airspace. It's to ensure that when you get on an aircraft, that you have the highest probability of landing safely at wherever you're going. That's their job. And so you have to think about this for a moment. If they say, well, what government agency actually regulates the privacy and security components of what you do in the drone industry? Well, then you kind of have to just defer to law enforcement. And then what agency is over drones in terms of law enforcement? I mean, is it the local guy, the local beat cop in Charleston, South Carolina? He doesn't understand the rules. And so I think one of the things that's going to have to happen, and I'm seeing some movement right now in the drone industry, is that the leaders in the industry are going to have to do what you just said, and we're going to have to come together and agree on a set of principles. But the problem is in the credit card world, for example, you've got the big players. You know who they are. In our industry, you've got a few big players and then mostly a bunch of small players. And there's nothing that really motivates the small players to play along with whatever we agree. And more importantly, I'm not sure that it would be fair to them because they don't have the capital to invest into the security infrastructure. I mean, we're currently going through a SOC 2 Type 2 audit. We're also working with NIST 853 and working to get FedRAMP certified. These things are not inexpensive. These are very expensive processes that by and large would probably be unachievable by 96% of our industry. So this is not a challenge we're going to solve today. And I think that's why the bigger providers like us are just taking what I would consider to be the high road. And instead of trying to figure out how to protect the data, we're just trying to not collect the data.
Well, Tom, in that vein, drone usage, kind of like Web3 and blockchain, it's just evolving so rapidly. Give us a sense for what you see becoming commonplace in the next 5 years when it comes to drones. Should Jody and I expect that we might be able to get on a VTOL helicopter and go a short distance, or Jetsons? What do you think?
Yeah, well, I'll answer that a couple of ways. So, I think it was in 1829 at the World's Fair, 1839 maybe, they had the first autonomous vehicle, and it drove all around the World's Fair for months, right? And it was amazing. No driver, and back then that was the future. Cars are going to be driving themselves and everything. 80 years later, almost to the day, I was in New York, standing outside the Virgin Hotel, and they were demonstrating a vehicle, self-driving vehicle, new version that was going to leave a parking lot and drive 238 feet to the front of the hotel to pick us up. And in that 238 feet, it sideswiped the parking meter, and it took out the back tire of a California Highway Patrol motorcycle. And in my mind, if in 80 years, that's how far we've come, I don't think that I'm even close to being ready to get into an autonomous vehicle that's actually going to actually fly and add an entirely new dimension to the way that it operates. The truth of the matter is, what's got to happen, and it's one of the reasons that we acquired AirMap, which is our biggest data challenge because we collect data for tens of thousands of flights a day in that system. But we don't identify it with an operator. We don't identify it with anything, but we do collect a lot of flight data, which is good data. But the reality is the technology to be able to fly autonomously and move around is there, whether it's 55 pounds or whether it's 55 tons, right? We've seen autonomous helicopters flying, autonomous aircraft. There's a 737 autonomous aircraft flying today in a test area. Could we do it? Yes. What we don't have the ability to do right now is deconflict that airspace. 400 feet and below, you've got drone operators doing drone inspection. You've got recreational operators flying. You've got delivery operations like the one that we're doing at scale. Now, all of a sudden, you want to have an autonomous taxi come pick you up and fly you. The biggest threat is not that autonomous vehicle may fail. That's always there's no such thing as a perfect vehicle, but how do you deconflict that airspace? And I think that before we're going to be able to put people in completely unmanned vehicles and fly in a taxi model, if you will, people don't like my answer, but I say that's 10 plus years away. And I believe that. What I do think is going to be commonplace much faster than most people have realized is home delivery. Down in Arkansas right now, we literally are doing order to delivery in under 30 minutes. So from the time the order is placed until it's set on the back porch is under 30 minutes now. That we've become an impulsive society. That's fast, right? And interestingly enough, the number one most ordered product, hamburger helper, which I think is just, if you want an interesting data point on that. Number two is mac and cheese. So I think delivery is going to be something that is going to become a viable option in your selection and checkout criteria when you order online. I think within 3 years, somebody will be getting drone delivery on a daily basis. And I think that rather than driving police cars, and this is something people don't like, but I think rather than driving police cars through neighborhoods, I think that there will be certain neighborhoods where it'll be appropriate to use drones for security and surveillance, and where it is appropriate, I support it.
All I can think of is the Jetsons show with all the flying drones, and I can think, okay, so if it's going to be prime rush hour, you're going to have cars on the roads, but then you're going to have oodles of drones going all over the place.
That's what Tom's saying. He's talking about UAS traffic management. That's what he means by deconflicting the airspace. And that's a big challenge that has to be addressed, because if you fly and you hit something, or besides bird or something, that airspace is going to become very congested as drone usage proliferates and becomes more mature.
Well, our daughter always would like our car to lift up so we don't have to sit in traffic anymore. So you have a young engineer ready to be able to tackle how can we go actually people in the air to move across?
I think one of the things that gets overlooked is why are people on the road, and how can drones begin to minimize traffic? Everybody immediately goes to how can I get in a drone and go somewhere? But if I can have things delivered to me rapidly, whether that's groceries, whether that's supplies, whether that's prescription medication, whether that's over-the-counter medication, or I can have my medical diagnostic equipment delivered to me by drone, so that I can do a home health telemedicine treatment, and then the drone can come pick it back up. People often overlook the amount of traffic reduction that can be a result of the type of things that drones will be able to do. And so I think we could see, while I wouldn't say people will necessarily be flying from point to point, I think they may be able to drive easier as we start to see a traffic reduction through the use of not just drones, but other autonomous vehicles.
I think something that comes to mind is interesting how you said earlier, at the moment, I wouldn't be able to tell whose drone it is. Well, I can envision drone accidents potentially could happen, or a drone hits something maybe on the way, and whose responsibility is it? If I asked for my hamburger helper to come to my house and the drone does something on my property or hurts my flowers, or I don't know, something, who do I blame?
Well, in that particular case, the operator, right? And so you've ordered it from, say, Walmart. It's being delivered by DroneUp. We're the operators. We're the ones that are operating the delivery vehicle. We would be responsible. I mean, that's our responsibility. And in this particular case, you do know, right? And this goes back to another thing, that if people just follow the rules, Every drone that's operating in the airspace should have an FAA registration number on it. That is a requirement to legally operate in the airspace. That drone crashes into your house, you should be able to go out, take a picture of the FAA identification, go online to the local FSDO, file a report. They're going to investigate. They know who that person is. It is only in the unusual circumstance where there's no FAA identification, or it was a operator who you didn't order from. But I will tell you that even in those cases, we have ways, if you have the drone in your possession, to determine who that operator is.
Super fascinating. You'll be happy to know Justin has followed all rules and has his FAA number on his drone.
Yeah, good. That's good to know. You're not even allowed to put it. Interestingly enough, we used to be able to put that FAA identification number behind the battery. And so we didn't have it out, so it wouldn't get worn from environmental, whatever. We'd stick it in behind the battery and put the battery in so that the sticker never got worn out. The FAA changed that rule that you had to put it outside and not under the battery. And everybody was like, well, why did they do that? And the reason was there was a concern that it could be potentially armed. And when you went to remove the battery, it could explode or whatever. So they did not want to have to force you to do any type of disassembly of the vehicle in order to be able to determine the FAA registration number, which I supported that one.
So, Tom, we like to ask all of our guests, what is your best privacy or security tip based on all of your years on this topic?
For us, the number one thing, and I know it's overused, but it is a couple of things. The first one is maintaining our software and our firmware and everything up to date on these. We are continually releasing upgrades based on new suspected and known threats. And so for our operators, it is, I have a lot of people who say, yeah, I've got an update, but I got 2 or 3 things going on and I need to get this mission done. And the problem is many of the firmware and software updates that we're doing today are, I would say 75% of them are security related updates. So maintaining those updates is a big thing. The second thing, and the most important thing, is having a well-defined privacy policy that is part of your onboarding process with your staff and your employees, and making sure that you are coordinating the execution of that privacy policy with your customers as well. Because I might have a good policy on how I'm collecting and handling this data. If my customer does not, then all I'm doing is basically losing control of that data. So we don't just enforce our policies. We have our customers sign on and agree to, and we can't police them, but at least we are trying to spread the goodness of our privacy and our security. And then the third thing is encouraging our staff, whether it's somebody here in the corporate office or whether it's an operator out in the field, to immediately inform us of anything that they see that might be a potential security risk and recognizing them for that accomplishment. I'll tell you, just happened in the last week, we had an operator who was in one of our remote locations and somebody had pasted the password to the system next to the keyboard. And this young gentleman who had only been on the job for about a day said, this just doesn't look right to me. This is a problem. And we're like, absolutely. And those little things matter. Those little things matter.
When you are not building a drone company and having so much work in keeping all of that data secure, what do you like to do for fun?
Fun. Yeah. So that, I remember that. I remember, I love to, my wife and I love to travel. And that's been a problem for the last few years. I don't know if you heard, there was a virus issue that kind of disrupted things for a little while. But we're getting back to it now. And the reason that I love to travel is my wife is very good at finding the few remaining locations in the world where cell phones don't work. We recently went, our last 2 trips were Costa Rica and Belize. And I had withdrawal symptoms from my phone for the first few days, but it's amazing how relaxed and refreshed you feel when you get yourself away from the rest of the world for a few days.
Absolutely. If people would like to learn more about DroneUp and you, where is the best place to send them?
I'd send them to droneup.com. And we're always looking for new partners and new ways of innovating the future. This industry right now is so exciting because it's seriously just now reaching its inflection point, and not just from a standpoint of technology, certainly not necessarily from a standpoint of regulations. But what I will tell you is that the customer adoption and the consumer opinion of drones has so dramatically improved in the last 24 months. I think some of that had to do a little bit with the pandemic, but we haven't even begun, and there are companies like ours that are just growing at crazy rates. And sometimes the partners aren't who you think. You think, is it another drone partner? No, it could be a delivery partner, it could be a restaurant, it could be security companies, it can be, you name it. There's a lot of opportunities. So if anybody's interested, we're always looking for partners.
Well, Tom, I really want to thank you for coming on today. We've gotten to know each other here just recently, but drones are just an exploding industry, and congratulations on all the success to DroneUp. And we look forward to hearing more as the trajectory seems to be continuing to rise. No pun intended.
Hey, our new tagline is "The path forward is up."
Good one. Well, Tom, thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to the She Said Privacy, He Said Security podcast. If you haven't already, be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes and check us out on LinkedIn. See you next time.